Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to part 2 of Kunt's ideas for Sun and Moon sets with the new Pokemon. So, the next on the list is Mudsdale, and the first thing that strikes you about this thing is its excellent physical bulk, excellent attack, and shit tier speed, which, as you've probably noticed, is the norm for this goddamn generation. This thing is a very, very simple Pokemon, just banded. That's all you can really run on it. EQ, CC, Rock Slide, and yeah, that's about it actually in terms of physical move pool. You can run Payback for whatever, but nope, I genuinely just think just EQ, Close Combat, which it gets for some reason. I don't know why the hell this thing gets Close Combat. It doesn't really look like it should get it, but whatever. So CC, EQ, which has got a redundant coverage, Rock Slide, and again, the only thing it really has for a fourth move is Sleep Talk, which works well on bandits, I suppose. And you will notice that in the trailers they touted its new signature move, High Horsepower, which unfortunately is not really meant for singles. It's just meant for doubles. It's weaker than EQ and less accurate. The only purpose I think is in doubles. It only hits one target as opposed to both. So there we are. Besides that, it is quite heavy, so Heavy Slam could do a lot of damage if you want to run that for things like Clefable, I suppose. But I don't know, this thing's got a very limited physical move pool actually. I mean, it gets lots of things like Body Slam and Mega Kick, but I think it's just going to be those. And another thing to note is its excellent ability Stamina, which boosts the defense stat every time it's hit by an attack. And it already starts off with very good physical bulk. If you want to go like Rest Talk or something as well, then that's going to be quite dangerous. But unfortunately, besides that, really not much to do. Really not much it can do. Next up, we have another Pokemon based on a spider that doesn't have the right number of legs. Say hello to Araquanid. Another water bug type, so this is basically a Mega Surskit, as you can see, with a sort of meh stat distribution, I think. It doesn't have a very good base stat total, and again, it's slow as shit. Obviously, the thing that stands out is its Spadef, interesting typing, and thanks to its new signature ability, Water Bubble, it has a resistance to fire type attacks, which is good. So it's actually a reasonable defensive typing in that case, because it has resistances to water, ice, fire, ground, fighting, which is, you know, not too bad. It doesn't have very good physical bulk, but that special bulk is excellent. You can put on something like an Assault Vest, although its defenses are terrible, and it doesn't get anything to boost those defenses with. What you could run is something of a... No. Looking again, it doesn't get anything. It does get Lunge, which is a new bug-type move, which lowers the opponent's attack. Then again, it gets Leech Life, a buff Leech Life, 80 base power, which restores HP by half the amount of damage inflicted, which is better in almost every sense. And it gets Mirror Coat to make use of that good Spadef, but it doesn't have very good HP. So in Cancer's idea, you could run either like a Banded set or maybe like a Mirror Coat set with, an AV set with Mirror Coat, which it gets. Liquidation, so it doesn't get Waterfall as far as I can tell. Leech Life to restore HP, and then Crunch and Facade. The only other move of note it gets is, it gets Scold, which you can run off of base 50 attack if you want. But the only other notable move it gets is Soak. So you can Soak plus Leech Life or something, but I don't know. This thing doesn't really have much of a purpose. The only reasonable state you could run with this thing is Max Attack, Max HP, Assault Vest. Another fast-looking Pokemon that's actually slow as shit. Say hello to Monograss attacking Lurantis. Now, the one thing you might see in this thing is Contrary Leaf Storm. Yes, Superior 2.0. Unfortunately, although it does have slightly better attack, its bulk is worse and its speed is a lot worse. So I don't think it's really going to do that. It does have just as shit coverage as Superior on the special side anyway, so it's not completely obsolete compared to it. What it does do very well, though, is as a physical attacker or even like a bulky support Pokemon, seeing as those defensive stats are actually fairly usable, although typing is admittedly shit. For a bulky support set, I'd recommend running either Leaf Blade or Leaf Storm plus Contrary. Leaf Guard is going to be useless unless you run it in the sun anyway, so if you're running a support set, you might as well have Contrary Leaf Storm, along with Aromatherapy, Synthesis, and Defog, which this thing gets for some reason. But one thing that I think this thing could do very well is a sort of a sunny day tank type thing. Unfortunately, because of its terrible speed, it works obviously better in Trick Room, because despite that bulk, it's a grass type. It's going to be taking a lot of damage from lots of types, no resist, lots of weaknesses, classic grass type. But in the sun, it can actually make use of Leaf Guard, as well as this thing's signature ability, which will come up in just a second, Solar Blade, which is basically a physical solar beam, which is actually pretty damn intriguing. There it is, 125 base power in this 2-turn attack, blah 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 blah. Here's a blade of the light's energy. In the sun, it, I hope, like Solar Beam, it actually strikes in 1 turn, and on top of that, it gets Leaf Guard, obviously, which benefits from this, which makes it immune to status under the sun. It gets growth, it gets synthesis, and it gets weathable. So what you could have is a powerful, bulky, mixed attacker under the sun that's immune to status and can recover, which I think is actually pretty scary. Thrown on Trick Room, Life Orb, this thing is going to be very powerful indeed. But we shall see how it turns out. I think the bulky support set is also pretty viable. It requires much less support than the Sunny Day set, so that's probably what we'll be seeing more of. Defog is, you know, it's a very good move. Well, you might look at this thing and think it's the next Amoonguss. Well, you're wrong. What this thing is actually trying to be is the next Parasect, that god-awful base stat totem. Low HP and mediocre defense means it's not going to be taking very many physical hits, but I suppose it does have a good Spitec stat, reasonable Spitec stat rather, and a good Spadef stat. So there is use there as a Spadef set. It certainly has a good support move ball with Spore and T-Wave, two of the best moves in the game, of course. And a Stab Moonblast and Giga Drain for recovery. Unfortunately, it doesn't really get that good abilities. Sorry, it doesn't get very good abilities. It gets Effect Spore, which we know is shit. I mean, that requires contact moves. Contact moves are mostly physical, and this thing has shit defense. And Rain Dish, which is just an inferior Dry Skin. Parasect gets Dry Skin, this thing gets Rain Dish, which is unfortunate. Although, obviously, in the rain, it is actually quite good, losing its fire weakness. But then it can't really make much use of it in other ways, in any other way. Sorry, it gets Spore and T-Wave, but it also gets Leech Seed. But the interesting move, I think, this thing gets is Strength Sap. Now, I did say it has a pretty poor defense stat. Strength Sap goes a long way towards fixing that, because it restores its HP by the same amount as the target's attack stat. It also lowers the target's attack stat, which is fantastic. So if you're in on something that can't really hit you, say like a Crocodile, what you could do is, instead of hitting it with the Moonblast or a Giga Drain, which would be logical, it goes really cute, you use Strength Sap. Now, a Crocodile has, what, base 117 attack? So, let's see, a quick bit of math, 234, 333, so that's 366 attack. Is it? Yeah, 366 attack. And this thing with base 60 HP gets 324 HP. So you'll recover your HP to full while lowering its attack by 1. Although obviously it lowers the attack 1 stage, meaning that you recover less and less HP each time. But by that point, they'll become so low on HP. Their attacks that will be so low that you won't need to recover HP. You can just finish them off with Giga Drain or Stab Moonblast, which is excellent. That's actually very, very good. And it's kind of a broken move if you think about it. I mean, if this thing had more HP, it would still probably be able to recover up to full HP. I mean, you're against anything with a reasonable attack stat. Anything with more than 324 attack will be enough to recover this thing's HP to full. That's absurd. So there's definitely some use in there. I'm going to try that. Well, what I actually want to try though is a Charge Beam set with AV. There you go. Charge Beam, Giga Drain, Moonblast, and yeah, Giga Impact. I don't know. Always the viable sets with the Counter Fairy. But yeah, in summary, Spore, T-Wave, Moonlight, if you don't want to use Strength Sap, which fucks over physical attackers and recovers this thing's HP to full, as well as Fairy Tapping. Say hello to Salazzle, an actual fast Alola Pokemon. Can you fucking believe it? Now, I think what everybody was looking forward to with this thing was its corrosion ability, which gives it the ability to poison, steel, and opposing poison types, which is obviously incredibly useful. However, this thing doesn't really have the bulk to be a toxic staller, so it's mainly going to be running an offensive set, let's be honest, especially offensive set. Get some good stab moves in Fire Blast and Sludge Wave, and even, you know, Venoshock and Dragon Pulse if you want to be that kind of guy. I don't know, I'm not judging. It obviously gets a reasonable physical move with things like Leech Life, Knockoff, Fling, Dragon Tail, Shadow Claw, Acrobatics, but it doesn't have the stats to make use of them. It will just be running Fire Blast and Sludge Wave, and probably Hidden Power, to be honest, because it doesn't even have a very good special move ball. And I honestly think that in the 4th move slot, it would be good to run Toxic. Not because you're going to be Toxic stalling things, but because things that are going to be switching into this are going to be, for one thing, Heatran and Toxapex, which we mentioned in the last one. Toxapex is a water poison type, which obviously completely fucks this thing. But it can poison it, which is fantastic. You can completely deter anything from switching into this thing. So you can deter any sort of fire type, any sort of poison type from switching in, unless they actually get Toxic, which is fantastic. Toxicking Heatran is huge. That thing is resistant to all forms of passive damage except for fucking hail. So the ability to Toxic it is incredibly useful. And if that thing can't switch in, then their team probably only has that. The team probably doesn't have many other switch-ins to poison and fire coverage. So that is fantastic. This thing is going to be very useful in OU. It's got a definite niche to be able to poison Heatran and Toxapex. Say hello to the cutest, fluffiest Pokemon in all of Alamamola. Beware! A pretty bad pun in Katsura's opinion, but it is a I don't like this thing. I think its design is terrible, the name is terrible, the typing is meh. Stats are good-ish. Could be, I don't know. I don't like this thing. But it does get a pretty good physical move. It gets the elemental punches, it gets return, it gets superpower, it gets earthquake, it gets swords dance, which is obviously great. And to make up for its slow stat, it also gets its low speed stat, it also gets force palm. What allows? Force palm is a very rarely seen fighting type move with 60 base power, which has a 30% chance to paralyze, which is fantastic. And its abilities are mostly useless. Fluffy does have some uses because it halves damage taken from contact moves. So it's kind of an inferior fur coat in that respect. But it's in exchange for halving the damage from contact moves, it obviously doubles the power of fire type moves. This thing, with its fantastic HP stat, good attack stat, and otherwise good physical bulk, I think would make a very competent AV user. This thing is mainly going to be running near physical, attacking stats. Attacks anyway. You could run something like Superpower, you could run, I don't know, Fire Punch, EQ, Rock Slide, or even like Facade to make up for burns. I think it also gets Bulk Up, but it doesn't really get any recovery, so you could do like Rest Talk, Bulk Up, Hammer Arm or something. It also gets a reasonable special move pool. No, it doesn't. I'm lying. It gets Focus Blast and Hidden Power. That's basically it. Focus Blast and Hyper Beam. 2 excellent stab moves. Yes, special set. But besides that, it's just going to be a simple Bandit set. Or just a bulky AV set. And this sexy beast is Tsareena. Excellent bulk, excellent attack, mediocre speed, and somewhat useful abilities. Now, this thing is kind of versatile, actually. It gets Rapid Spin of all things. And given its good bulk, I suppose the support set is not inconsiderable. It also gets, as offensive moves, Chop Kick, High Jump Kick, Play Rough, and U-Turn. In addition to Teeter Dance, of course, and as well as, support moves like Aromatherapy and presumably Synthesis. I didn't actually check that. The support set is very much in the cards, but I think that what would be more useful, besides possibly a Banded set, given its good attack stat and good coverage in High Jump Kick, Chop Kick, and Play Rough, as well as U-Turn, would be a Scarf set. Now, the reason why a Scarf set on this thing would be particularly effective, it's not that fast, but it does have good attack, and more importantly, the ability Queenly Majesty makes it immune to priority. So you have a Scarfed Pokemon, which is immune to priority. Now, that is fucking fantastic, do you not think? In fact, even if it's not Scarfed, if it's just against something slower, that slower thing simply cannot touch it. So, for example, a Mega Abomasnow gets fucked by this thing. Obviously, you can't switch in, but it can't hurt you with Ice Shard. And if you're running like Banded High Jump Kick, Abomasnow is dead, which is fantastic. Other things like Donphan, which normally only ever carry like Ice Shard to hit Grass types, that's going to die to Chop Kick, which I should mention is this thing's new sort of signature ability: 70 base power, 100 accuracy, Grass type physical attack, which lowers the opponent's attack. But Queen of Majesty is actually going to give this thing some pretty good utility. And it's a very good counter to things that rely on their priority moves to be effective. Other things like, B-Sharp, for example. This thing is just faster than B-Sharp. You can Oko it with High Jump Kick, obviously, and it can't be touched with Sucker Punch, which is fantastic. It's not just that. Other Dark types like Absol's quicker. But if you're running a Scarf set, then Absol, for example, what else relies on priority to be good? Well, I would say Bullet Punch Scizor, but Scizor obviously takes a hit from this. other things like, I mean, Ice Shard, Mamoswine, of course, Mach Punch, Breloom. It is quite effective, but we shall see what comes of this. Next up, of course, we have this thing, Comfy, and immediately it's let down by its terrible HP stat, which is a shame given that it has good defense and special defense, and a very good speed stat, which means it could be very useful as a fast support Pokemon / fast cleric. Even a fast grassy terrain setter, seeing as this thing gets Flower Veil, which is obviously useful in that, in grassy terrain. But in terms of a cleric set, it's obviously fast, it gets access to aromatherapy, it gets access to synthesis, it doesn't get access to wish, but it doesn't get access to U-turn, so it can act as a pivot, ignore the next one. And floral healing is this thing's niche, which under grass terrain restores its HP by presumably 75%, which is actually going to be very good. And this thing's probably going to be one of the best grassy terrain setters, thanks to Flower Veil and that floral healing and U-turn to pivot out into something to abuse it. In addition to those moves, it gets Calm Mind and Dazzling Meme, so it could act as a pretty reasonable Calm Mind mon. I think Florges does it better, even with a better speed stat. But that's basically all it can do, Calm Mind or Cleric / Grassy Terrain set. Even if you're not running Grassy Terrain, then you can opt to run either Triage or Natural Cure. Triage makes every single one of its priority moves it gives priority to its recovery moves, i.e. Synthesis or Floral Healing. I think Floral Healing is better. The PP is not given here, but it can't be worse than Synthesis for a start, and it doesn't get affected by weather. In addition to that, or you could run Natural Cure plus Floral Healing as well, and Aromatherapy. Very good as a support Pokemon, but it's probably going to be in the lower tiers because, you know, Florges is the thing. Moving on. This thing has no useful niche in singles. It's built entirely for doubles. It has Grumpig stats with Graphics typing. Nothing really interesting to do there. And you probably. Oh yes, Daddy. Stab close combat of 120 attack. Defiant ability. Yes, please. Unfortunately, this thing does not get very good coverage. I say that, Stab CC is normally pretty good. But besides that, it doesn't really get much. It gets EQ, Aerial Ace, I suppose. And it's a reasonable special move. It gets Acrobatics, but besides that, it doesn't really get much else. But I think this thing is just going to be running like a Scarf set. It doesn't get U-turn for some reason. I mean, I expect this thing to be a bit like Primate. It gets Rock Slide, which is a very questionable utility. Iron Head for Fairies. But yeah, this thing's main niche in singles is just going to be like a Defiance set. So given its good physical bulk, it might make a reasonable Scarf set, seeing as it won't take too much from priority. Then why the hell this thing has 100 base HP? It doesn't really fit. It doesn't really look fat at all. But yeah, slap a Scarf on it, spam close combat, get boost, be immune to Intimidate, and get boost from Defog, and that's about all there is to say about this. Oh Jesus! Say hello to Surskit on fucking steroids. Golisopod, 530 base stat total, better physical defense than Skarmory, though with the shitter typing, base 125 attack, 90 speed F, and of course, since it's Alola, it gets base 40 speed. Now this thing is obviously going to be a physical attacker. It gets some reasonable moves. It gets Sucker Punch, it gets Aqua Jet, it gets Leech Life, the buff Leech Life, mind you, Brick Break, Rock Tomb, just to lower things speed I suppose, Shadow Claw, Rock Slide, EQ, Swords Dance to make a physical attack stat even better, and what's the other one? Waterfall, or even Liquidation. Now if you remember Liquidation is an 85 base power water type physical attack, which lowers the opponent's attack by one stage. But also gets X's if you don't feel like using Leech Life, although I think that's obviously the way to go. It gets a new signature move, First Impression. Although this move has great power, it only works the first turn the user is in battle. I don't know if that gets priority, like Fake Out. It doesn't say. If it doesn't, then it's completely fucking useless, and you should just run Leech Life. It also gets Spikes, so it can make use of the fact that it forces switches, and it's excellent physical defense to do that. But the only downside of this thing is its ability. When this thing is at half HP or less, it gets forced out, which is strange. I don't know what happens when it then switches back in. Does it if it takes another hit, is it forced to switch back out again? I don't know. That's kind of annoying, really, because presumably, seeing as the thing is really slow, if it just takes an attack, it gets forced out straight away before it gets the chance to do any damage at all. which is a huge shame. But you'll notice that this thing gets 3 priority moves. It gets Sucker Punch, it gets Aqua Jet, and what was the other one he got? He got something else, I swear. Hang on. Was I making that up? First Impression, if that's a priority move. No, but seriously, you could run Swords Dance, you could run Leech Life, Liquidation, or Aqua Jet and Sucker Punch. And those are sort of reasonable coverage, I suppose. And given this thing's good physical defense, it's going to be staying around, and it's going to be, it can set up spikes forever. But I'm much more concerned about the physical attacking set. That thing is going to be a threat. Assuming that emergency exit does become too much of a disadvantage, we'll have to see how that turns out. Base 35 speed. Hello to another Pokemon joining the ranks of Vanillex and Chandelier as something whose design is based on something completely inanimate and just kind of weird. This thing is a special Golurk, essentially. A much slower, weaker, and with probably... How bulky is Golurk? Golurk's pretty bulky. With worse special defense, but much better defense. This thing is going to be the best Terrakion counter in OU. But, and looking at its abilities, Water Compaction, it boosts the Pokemon's defense stat sharply when hit by Water-type moves, so if it switches into a Aqua Jet or something, it's going to be fine, it's going to benefit. It does get reliable recovery, which we'll come on to in a second, so that's good. And it can strike back with a Stab, Earth Power, or Shadow Ball, or even Energy Ball if you want to run this thing deliberately to counter physical Water types. I don't think that's a good idea, but you can. The main disadvantage to Water Compaction is, presumably when you're hit by special Water-type moves, it still only boosts the defense as opposed to the special defense. As seeing as this thing's special defense is lacking, that really doesn't help it there. And the other ability, Sand Veil, I think this is going to be used a lot more on this thing than Water Compaction. And the reason for that is this thing's recovery move, Shore Up. Shore Up is a... where is it? There it is, level 54. The user regains up to half its max HP. It restores more HP in a sandstorm. So this thing is going to be a fucking pain in the ass in the sand. If you can imagine it running Earth Power, Shadow Ball, and I don't know, Toxic. This thing is going to be even worse than bloody Sandveil Gliscor or something. So you got Sandveil, and you got a move that recovers 75% of health in sand. This thing is going to be bloody annoying as hell. Very good physical defense. It can wall things like what else? What else can it wall? Well, I mean, obviously, what was it? Terrakion comes to mind, but the other OU threats, the other physical OU threats, in the current ORAS metagame, aren't really threatened by this thing at all. I mean, Excadrill doesn't like Earth Powers, and Tyranitar doesn't give a shit. But yeah, no, I think its main utility is going to be to annoy. To annoy and Toxic Stall. Yeah, that thing's gonna be really annoying. Even gets Iron Defense. I don't look forward to facing this thing. But... Say hello to the bastard love child of Wobbuffet and Chuckle, with good defense and Spadef, low HP, and absolutely zero offensive moves. Hooray! Meet Pyukumuku. Dual Screens, Unaware, Toxic, Protect, and interestingly, a move newbie called Purify, which we've just missed. Just a second. When it comes back again, we'll look at it. This thing is going to be something of a wall. Pure Water typing is, of course, very good. You can set up dual screens, and it can bullshit forever. Purify, there we go. The user heals the target status condition, which seems kind of stupid. But if the move succeeds, it also restores the user's own HP. So you could Toxic and then Purify. Toxic, and this thing is Venom Drench as well. So you could Toxic something, Venom Drench it, then recover. I'm not sure how that works. It's not really very good. It does get counter to make use of that terrible HP stat. It gets Taunt, which is hilarious. Base 5 speed. Speedy Taunt. Oh, yes. It gets Baton Pass, which is interesting. And the thing I was looking forward to, actually, is that a set that uses... Well, you can either Curse and Baton Pass. Oh, it gets Recover. So you don't need Purify. Never mind. Don't use Purify. Use Recover. Now, this thing's going to be a pain in the ass with Recover and Unaware. Can't really do anything besides Toxic, but you don't need anything else, do you? It even gets Pain Split as well, if you want to be even more of a cunt. As well as some more utility moves like Soak and Gastro Acid, which make the user a Water type and remove its ability respectively. But as I was saying, the thing that this thing could do really well is, with Unaware, it could psych up the opponent's boost, then it can Baton Pass them out into something, which would be fucking amazing. It doesn't get Clear Smog or anything like that, so you can't do you can't take their stats and then Clear Smog them and then Baton Pass, which is a shame. But given this thing's very interesting support move pool, and Unaware. It also gets Innards Out, which is kind of like a buffed, what is it called? Aftermath. What happens is, when this Pokemon gets knocked out, the thing that knocked it out loses HP equal to the amount of HP this thing had on the turn it died, essentially. So if you OHKO it from full, you're going to be losing 314 HP, exactly, from base 55 HP, which is somewhat useful. I think Unaware is more useful overall, because Innards Out only threatens, you know, the one Pokemon that kills it, and you can play around it by doing as little damage to it as possible until you finally knock it out, because all this thing can't hit you. For example, if you're behind a sub, this thing is completely fucked. So it can set up screens, and that's about it. But I think Unaware is more useful to maintain pressure throughout the match. And it's a very interesting thing. I'm going to look forward to using this. I just wish its HP was a little bit better. And I don't know why it's got an attack stat, seeing as it's got no offensive moves, except for Struggle. Moving on. And now, Type Null and its evolution Silvari, we're going to look at the same time, because they are very similar Pokemon. They both have, you know, first of all, a very strange design, and very strange movesets, it has to be said. They don't really excel at anything. They get, you know, Swords Dance as boosting moves. They don't get Nasty Plot, so they're mostly going to be physical attackers. The reason I'm looking at them together is because their stats are almost the same as well. I mean, Silvally has better speed, and that's the only difference. Well, aside from basically a knockoff multi-type, which is kind of shit. I mean, it kind of hinders Arceus in that it can't hold an item, and Arceus benefits because it's got base 120 stats across the board. Silvari's got base 95 across the board, so it's not really going to be using it as well. Anyway, in terms of viable sets, you got, first of all, let's start with multi-attack, which just changes to its type depending on the held item, of course. You got the Elemental Fangs, you got Iron Head, X-Scissor, Crush Claw, which is useless, Tri-Attack, Double Edge, Thunderbolt, Shadow Ball, Ice Beam, Hyper Beam, Dragon Claw, Flame Charge, Flamethrower, Steel Wing, U-Turn, T-Wave, X-Scissor, Draco Meteor for some goddamn reason. Now this thing's move pool isn't quite as great, but the moves they're actually going to be using are pretty much the same. You know, Shadow Claw, Double Edge, Swords Dance, T-Wave maybe. And U-Turn as well. I mean, you could run like a banded set on this thing. The reason I look at Type Null as well is because it's probably going to be useful in PU to some extent. I mean, 95 stats across the board, and the ability to hold a Violite is going to be very good. So yeah, they could probably run like a Rest Talk, SD, Double Edge set or something, or just SD, Double Edge, T-Wave, U-Turn or something. I don't know, but I think it's actually going to be quite useful. It's going to be very bulky, of course. It can't be critted. Unfortunately, it doesn't get any moves to boost its defenses, which is fine. And Silvally is just probably going to be like a fast setup sweeper. Again, not in a very high tier, because although those stats are the base stat total is very high, it doesn't excel in anything. So yeah, and if it holds a memory disk to change its type, then it can't hold a Scarf or a Band or a Life Orb or anything, or Lefties. So honestly, I don't really know where it's going to end up. It might end up in RU as some sort of like T-Wave attacker, but we shall see. And the same thing goes for Type Null, except it's just going to be lower tier and bulkier. The next thing we look at is Minior, which looks kind of shit at first. 60 HP and 100 defenses, that's basically Corsola. And it's got a very good defensive move pool, I reckon. Acrobatics, Stone Edge are very good stab moves. It gets U-Turn as well for pivoting. Well, I don't really know how that works with shields down. He also gets Shell Smash, and look, it's come out of its core, and oh my god, its stats have changed. That thing is speedy as shit. And it's gone again. So Shields Down ability means that when this thing gets below half HP, it turns into that other speedy offensive form, which could actually be quite good. So give this thing a weakness policy. When it's in its base form, it can take a hit with those base 100 defenses, and when it goes below half HP, it turns into that monster with +2 attack, +2 attack, and 120 speed. That's very good. And on top of that, if you use weakness policy and you use it up, you get access to a fully powered acrobatics. You get Stone Edge as well. You get Earthquake. And if you want to run a mixed move pool as well, you don't really have that much of a special move pool, to be honest. You get what? Dazzling Meme, U-Turn, if you want to waste that weakness policy, Explosion, Ancient Power, there we go, that's not bad. Stealth Rock as well for some utility, and Psychic, I suppose. But another interesting thing this gets is Shell Smash. I don't think I could really make use of it because it's not really that bulky. I mean, weakness policy means it can survive maybe like one hit, and then go for a sweep from there on very low health with, well, survive at like a weak hit. and it just sweep with like Acrobatics, EQ, and Stone Age. As a utility, you can't really use it as a defensive set because it doesn't get any other abilities. It has to change into that form when it gets below half health, which is a shame. But I like to see. I would certainly try this thing with Shell Smash though. I think that'd be fun. It doesn't get like Endure or anything, which is really bad. Maybe like a Focus Sash or something. You guys like Shell Smash, Focus Sash. But yeah, no, I think that would be pretty good. Let's just see, shall we? So the options are really going to be, yep, Weeder's Policy, or Sash, Shell Smash. Both of those look very intriguing. This thing is obviously going to be like a fast offensive threat. We'll see how it does. Oh god, now this thing is going to be a threat. Excellent base stat total, good attack, good SPDF. The key thing that makes this thing a threat though is that comatose ability. It makes it immune to all status as far as you can tell because it's supposed to be permanently asleep. So the obvious thing to run with this thing is a max HP, max SPDF, bulk up set. It gets recovery and wish as well. You can have bulk up, like return. It gets really interesting move pool. It gets Shadow Claw, it gets Acrobatics, it gets Payback, Rock Slide, even gets Swords Dance, U-Turn, Play Rough, Rapid Spin, Sucker Punch, Wood Hammer, as I think I already mentioned, EQ, Brick Break. This thing is going to be amazing, I think. It's a shame we can't run everything at once. You could even run like a banded set, seeing as this thing has actually got pretty good speed for Alamamola. You can pivot with U-Turn, and again, it's immune to status, which is fantastic. You can even run a Calm Mindset on this thing, which doesn't really go with its stat spread or its move ball, come to think of it. If you want to set up quickly, it's also got access to Swords Dance. This thing is just going to be unstoppable. It even gets Rapid Spin as well if you do want to run some sort of utility set. Like a Wish Protect, Rapid Spin, U-Turn set or something, I'm not quite sure. It doesn't really have the HP to be a good Wish Passer, but I mean it can stay around, which is the point. Seeing as it doesn't get rest, or Sleep Talk, I'm assuming from that means it's innately asleep, if that makes sense. Sorry, it does get Sleep Talk, but it doesn't get rest, so I'm assuming that means it can't fall asleep. It's immune to all status. Or even if it falls asleep, it can still attack. I'm not quite sure. But this thing is going to be very hard to stop if it sets up.